Hey everyone, welcome back to Will Work for Podcast. As always, I'm Daniel Thornton, and with me is
Brendan Boland.
once again had to think about that question again, but yeah, we're back. We're back, baby. Do you want to reflect on Talia? Do you want to try anything that she may have been talking about last week? I don't really know if it is one of those things where I'm reflecting more on like how services are rendered to people like across different things now with like all this telework. I used to be really against it, but after talking to her, I don't know, maybe there is something to do with, we need to expand more of these telework services.
Well, I think telehealth in general is going to, stay and has created more access. So I think that's a positive.
Yeah.
The practice that she was trying to encourage us to do is about, just the positive beginning of the day to encourage whether or not, evoke these ideas of like, today is an important day. Today, like you can, be successful in the ways that you want. And I think, that's not something I do consistently, but I do recognize like how powerful that is, of just like having that little bit of personal faith that you can accomplish what you're trying to, but
yeah, I mean, we've had this like theme of, reflect the goodness in your life last few weeks. So I've been trying to do that more as well. I've been more proactive with a lot of things that I've done, like for myself, because I've like started to invest in the stock market, which I thought I never do. I just filed my taxes, so kudos to me, I suppose. And these small things, it's weird how they add up and they make you feel better when you actually accomplish like these goals, and how you shouldn't trivialize any of the stuff that you do accomplish within your life, even the small things. So that is something I've been trying to actively do lately. So I don't know. You have a good accomplishment in the last couple of weeks you may want to share?
Well, this is awkward. No. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, this weekend I actually went and performed for the first time in a long time, so that was cool.
There you go. That's a positive accomplishment.
Yeah.
I don't think you had to pull that deep for that.
Well, I mean, like it's funny because even in that situation, so for me and how I experience a lot of things, and we know this about each other, or you know this about me, where like it's hard sometimes to frame it in positive. So for in this example, on Sunday night, ended up performing for my friends this mix that I had put together, which was cool. Had my name and a LED screen behind me. But and afterwards, like I had a lot of people like giving positive praise and just kind of saying like, that was awesome and kudos and whatever. But for me, I ruminate on but there was this that I could have done better, or this or that, and I could have like transitioned here, right? So like it's interesting where I can get positive feedback, but at the same time still question kind of the result, And that's a practice that I'm working on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just negative. That's negative mindset, man. That's negative mindset.
Totally.
But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to get out of that sometimes because I'm very similar to like focusing on all the bad things instead of one of the good things that I've done. But you do have, and it takes a lot of effort for me as well as I'm sure it does for you, of getting out of that. But you just gotta force yourself sometimes too.
Practice.
Like, find your orange,
I got my oak tree today. This is my orange. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so we hope that you focus on your happiness and all the successes in your life out there. Please remember, you're worth something. You've done something good. You just got to find it. I'm sure it's happened. So, and tell us about it. Like and subscribe. Follow us on all the platforms. We're on Instagram, Twitter, all the things, TikTok. And you can email us at willworkforpodcast@gmail.com. That's willwork4podcast@gmail.com. And on that note, we're actually going to go into a little bit of negative, but also a positive because I found this rejection letter that I thought was hilarious, and it should be because it's from Mad TV,
Mm.
but it was just in the ether, so I thought I'd read it out. It said, "Sorry, but we've got bad news. You've been rejected. Don't take this personally, though. All of us feel rejected at one time or another. At least that's what our group of therapists tells us here at MAD. He says we shouldn't worry about it, so that should be your attitude. What, me worry? Besides, although you've been rejected, things could have been a lot worse. Your material might have been accepted. Then where would you be?" And then it goes from madly whatever. P.S. Our group therapist also mentioned that many people are so rejected by rejection that they don't try again, and we wouldn't want that. We really would like to keep sending us your article ideas and scripts, so we can keep sending you these idiotic rejection slips. So there it is. Just a little fun rejection letter to brighten up your day. Hopefully everybody gets rejected, and keep on sending us your stuff.
Yeah, remember, as Ediana says, rejection is redirection, right? So whatever that opportunity was, it can lead to what it's supposed to be.
Exactly. And on that note, on with the show. Well, we'd like to welcome to the show Daniel Sih. We're really happy to have him on here. He's the author of Spacemaker, which helps readers learn why we need to unplug and unwind to order to think clearly and offer strategies on how to do it. Daniel is also an accredited top 5 Clinton Strengths coach with the South Pacific Strengths Network and co-creator of Email Ninja Learning. Welcome to the show, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to meet you and have a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, your whole story, and I read a bit about your book, is fascinating, but we were talking like offline about, how you created your business, and we've talked about this a lot before. So it would be really great to just start off with a little bit of your story and tell us about yourself.
Yeah, no thanks. Look, I've never been someone who thought I would start my own business. It kind of happened by accident. I wasn't one of those people that came out of the womb and thinking I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And so I went to school, and I ended up studying physiotherapy and worked as a physical therapist or a physiotherapist for about 10 years in Australia and in a few other places like the UK. But I never really found my feet as a physio. Like, I was a good physio because I work hard and I'm always fairly determined. But I don't know, I don't have a detailed brain. I'm not good at observing people's movements, and it just wasn't my fit. And I found myself eventually moving into physio management, which I was fantastic at. I really enjoyed leading people, creating change, doing projects, and ended up doing project management in health. So I had a pretty stable career. I was permanent. My wage was fairly good. I just built a house, or started building a house, and I had 2 young kids. But I just increasingly became dissatisfied after a decade, realizing that, that it was a bit like there was nowhere to go. And I felt like I'd somehow done what I was meant to do in that area. And I went up and I actually covered my manager's job for a while, and I just thought, this is just more paperwork and more admin, and I lost my creative spark in that job. So I felt a bit stuck, and I went to career counseling and kind of thought, I like coaching and I like training. But then just kind of accidentally, I started to train people in stuff that I discovered myself in a management role, like how to get their inbox to zero and how to run a to-do list. And people really found lots of value in that. So I trained a few more people just within my own teams. And eventually what happened is my friend and I, a colleague of mine who had a similar passion for productivity, decided to go to a local training consortium. And we said, hey, we're 2 schmucks. We've got no training background. We just know how to manage stuff. And do you want us to be able to train your people? And they said, what would you call it? I'm like, well, Email Ninja. It's just some random name. And anyway, that course took off. People struggle with high volume email. And so it was on the side of my desk, but we had to get like an ABN, a business account number. And for the first few years, it was really a hobby. And once a year, we got to take our wives out for like a meal, and that was all the money we took home. But we put the money into a website and a business and developed our training, and we had a lot of fun with it. But I also found around that time I just started to burn out, and I was working like this job, and this kind of hobby thing called Spacemakers was accidentally growing. And I was actually doing a lot of volunteer work for my church community as well. And I ended up doing volunteer work and then becoming a part-time church pastor. So I had 3 jobs at the same time,
Holy
which
shit.
was just crazy. And I started to get breathing difficulties, and I was breathless at work, and then I got breathless at like dinner. Then I was breathless reading books to my kids. I'm like, that's ridiculous, And after doing all the medical tests, it was just that I was overcooking it, and I was, stretched. I was tired, and I was loving my work. Actually, I'm really grateful that I've always enjoyed my work, but it was too much, and it was anxiety without me even knowing what the symptoms were. And so, I had to make some tough decisions to work out, what do I do? Because I had this job which paid really well. I'd trained for a decade, and I'd trained for 4 years and then worked for a decade, and I was permanent, and people saw me as a manager. But I could see that if I kept going in another 5, 10 years, 20 years, I'd be in golden, handcuffs. And, the expression that you're there because of the money and the security.
Right.
And I knew that there wasn't a future for me in that, but I just didn't know how to let go of it. And yet I had this businessy kind of hobby that didn't, that paid for one dinner a year, but didn't pay for any, life expenses. But I was really passionate about that. But I'm like, well, that's tough. And then I was also doing church ministry a few days a week, which I felt very called to do, but again, didn't pay a lot. And so, I don't know if your listeners will have had similar pivots. I know a lot of people are pivoting during COVID and really questioning what they're doing and trying to find a new transition. But I found myself in this reset stage where I kind of knew that something was changing inside of me. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And there was an easy option just to keep doing what I used to do. The hard option, I wasn't sure what it was meant to be, and yet I knew there was this change. And so I went on this journey really to just reflect and pray and think deeply and try to work out what was I meant to do next.
Right. So what was like one of those things that I'm assuming you took like this leap of faith to get in here. And I guess kind of going back to your book about like creating that space, like what do you think that when you're making this transition, do you feel like there was a lesson that you wish you had known prior to doing it?
Yeah. So for me, it was the beginning. Well, the beginning, it was another step in me learning to make space for deep thinking and reflection and silence, I suppose, to examine my inner life. What I found is in my book, I talk about periods of set and reset. So you imagine just, I don't know, a squiggly line, and the peak of life is when you're set. You know what job you're meant to do, or you're in the right relationship, you're in the right city, and you kind of have goals, or you know what you're trying to achieve. And I'm great at set. I'm just like, get a goal, do a to-do list, break it down, work hard, and achieve what you need to achieve. But like the dip, and that's what this was a reset. And it actually really requires a different set of skills to navigate my way through. You can push harder and work faster and get more done, and you'll actually be counterproductive, because what you need is to let go of things and to sit in that uncomfortable silence. There's a cartoonist in Australia called Lunig who has these kind of wacky cartoons, and he has this picture of a person on the ground, and he writes a poem, and he says, if your heart is broken and cracked, and there's this heart that's kind of exposed in this cartoon, don't just close it up, let a dog lick it, and let the wind blow in, and let the sunshine kind of burn it. And what he's saying is, when you're in these uncomfortable periods where you don't know what to do next, there's a lot of wisdom in just being in that space and not fixing it, and reflecting and putting time to think deeply, to learn, and to wait for the aha moments, but actively wait. So what I did is, I went and I had a few days where I just sat in silence and I walked on the beach and I journaled and I just
Okay.
reflected.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke to friends and I brainstormed all the different ideas of what I'm good at, but I tried not to jump in and just start trying to find a job. I remember reading a lot and journaling a lot and praying a lot and thinking a lot. And I did my Strength Finder training. So I tried to work out my top 5 strengths. And so I did some inner life examination to try to work out who I was, because I didn't want to get stuck on the wrong ladder. Stephen Covey says, you can spend your life climbing the corporate ladder and then find out it's against the wrong wall. And
Mm-hmm.
if I grabbed for something too quickly, I kind of sensed that I would end up finding a solution quickly, but it wouldn't. I'd be living someone else's life, not my life. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm describing that very well.
I think what you're trying to say is that what I can understand is you were in this corporate job. You kind of saw like, this isn't going anywhere. I see the dead end. And then you had this other passion of like the email ninja, and there also like a little bit of coaching, and you wanted to make up this decision whether you're going to go to the next, whether you're going to go into that rest phase, because then let's be honest, like the rest phase is also like the lack of money phase, because like your stability has been disrupted. But you thought making sure that you introspect, knowing that that was the right decision, makes it easier to go into that phase. Is that correct?
Yeah. But I mean, the weird thing about that rest phase is I was still running 3 jobs and I was physically burnt out, and, and I was having breathing issues. So it's just kind of conundrum where I needed to slow down and reflect on my inner life while I was running to stand still. But sometimes that's just life, isn't it? You can't necessarily predict. You just have to go with what you have at the time. And I remember 2 aha moments actually that basically solved the problem for me. There were a few that I journaled, and I had a few interesting, even dreams at night that guided kind of my sense of what I'm thinking at a deeper level. But the 2 aha moments was I was chatting with my manager, my physiotherapy manager, and she said, "Look, I can tell your heart's not in it like it used to be, and I know that you're thinking about moving on, but we really value your skills, particularly in projects and changing culture. What if we just offered you a day a week permanent? Therefore, you can keep your permanency. If things go bad with whatever you choose to do, you'll be safe and secure, and there won't be
That's
any
a good
risks."
manager.
It's really good, isn't it? She's amazing.
Yeah.
And I was really thankful. But do you know what happened? In my gut, I was just like, no! Like I just had this deep, gut-wrenching physical reaction when she spoke to me. And I know her heart was in the right place. But I just thought, actually, I immediately knew the only reason I would stay around as a physiotherapist is because I was fearful of not having money and I was terrified of taking the leap. And I just knew at that conversation, you couldn't have had a better offer. And I knew it was wrong. And so I actually resigned completely. I didn't do that. I cut the cord because I knew I would always be drawn back to that safe and secure job if I didn't make the cut. I'm not saying we should always burn our bridges. There's a lot of wisdom to actually, do things carefully. So that was my first aha moment. But the other one happened a few days later, and I went out to dinner with a colleague, or maybe a friend who ran a very successful consulting business, and that's where I was heading, into consulting. And I said, I've made the decision. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to quit my job, my permanent job, and I'm going to make business like my thing. I'm going to dive head in. And I remember he looked at me straight in the eye and he said, "That would be dumb." And I was like, and we talked about it. It really hit me. And he basically said, "That would be really stupid. You're going to be broke. You've got like 2 kids, a mortgage, and you don't earn any money from your business. And you've got to do things sensibly." So I ended up working part-time in a non-permanent job and getting some paid church work as well. So I ended up finding some income for the first few years. And I didn't earn much, actually. You're right, for business, but it was an amazing experience. And then after 2 or 3 years, I started to earn enough money to be able to then say, okay, well, I can live on $30 an hour in Australia. And then, as my income will one day hopefully get back to what it used to be. But Yeah, I don't know. It was that process of, and actually the interesting thing is once I'd made that call, I knew that, yes, I was ready to jump, but it was going to be way harder and way more painful and way more costly financially than I thought it was going to be. Once
Mm-hmm.
I had that picture, then I went back into set rather than reset. And I just
Mm.
had to tick off goals. I had to ring clients. I had to develop training and fix my website. It was like go, go, go. Uh, but I needed that inner work to have the moral and internal conviction to actually sustain the hard changes over the next 4 or 5 years. If I didn't have that internal conviction that came from silence and space and reflection, and actually that sense of being guided for me by God, then I don't know if I would have been able to sustain the pain of launching into my own business and career. I had to know it was the right thing for me at a deep level.
Yeah, well, that's a great lesson to learn of like you need to make that we talk a lot about this on the show about mindset and like being introspective and understanding like yourself before you apply to anything like money, goals, whatever it may be. So that's a really great lessons learned. And I'm wondering now that you're like successful and your company has launched off the ground, and I know that you deal with like higher level clients, like people who are in like top tier management positions and stuff like that. But I think a lot of those, I'm wondering about like the mindset that it takes to get there, because you talk a lot about space and like how the change of mindset and routine within your books and like how you do things. What lessons can you learn early in your career, like habits that you can do so that you can apply them later when you are in a larger, like in a more senior role?
Yeah, that's really helpful. And look, if I go back to that story, actually, remember I still had anxiety and I was breathless and I wasn't very well. I was on the edge of burnout. So, uh,
Yeah.
making the decisions to reduce some of the pressures on my life and to focus was part of that solution. It was the kind of the big picture change. But
Mm-hmm.
the deeper, the other change that truly made a difference was reshaping my habits around healthier work-life balance. It was about making space, which is where the name Spacemakers came from. And it was about making space to think deeply and rest fully and reconnect with my family and other loved ones and friends in a really meaningful way by creating what I call predictable patterns or rhythms in my life. So to make habitual the things that really mattered and to put them into my calendar first. Because the thing about running a business, you could easily, there's the old kind of joke, I run my own company, I'm an entrepreneur, I get to work whenever I want, I have complete flexibility over my time as long as I
Right.
work 70 hours a week. You know,
Right.
and which is ridiculous, right? So you can easily get caught into this trap where, yeah, I've got flexibility, but I only ever get to, sleep 3 hours a night. And so I didn't want to create a business like that. I didn't want to. I wanted to make sure that the stuff that really mattered, which I hadn't paid attention to enough before I became breathless, which is for me rest, like a digital Sabbath once a week, making space to read and pray and meditate and reflect, hanging out with my kids and making sure I have time to exercise, those kind of self-care habits. I wanted to put that in first and say, if the business is going to survive, if it's going to grow and if it's going to live, it has to be around these things, which are my priority. Uh, I'm not going to put the business first and then basically turn around in 20 years and have a divorced family, terrible relationships with my kids, have a triple bypass surgery and actually hate the business I created that was so successful, because that's like, what's the point of a business and what's the point of wealth if
Well,
there's
that's
no joy at the end of it?
That's really interesting that you say that too, because I think when we talk about, like, when we think about starting your own business, I think for me, I mean, I think about like you have to sacrifice everything, sell everything you own, like work 100 hours a week, make your dream come true, and you just like do whatever is necessary. So I think it's interesting that you cognizantly made this decision to create certain parameters around your business so that you were happy. It's like, how do you do that though? Like, did you set a schedule? Like, do you write things? I'm interested, like, what the process of that is to make that happen.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, firstly, I did have a bunch of healthy productivity habits, and they help. So there are efficiencies by being efficient. So I've got, Email Ninja is about how to get your inbox to zero. So I've got a process for managing email and not getting too distracted by it. And I capture everything that I have in my mind, like every task that comes my way, whether it be chatting with you or, buying presents for my kids, like everything goes onto a list so I can clear my brain and actually organize it and then work out, what are my priorities this week and what I'm not going to do. So I am an organized person, and there are certainly skills that I think are helpful to run a business because there's a complexity. And so you want to have helpful time management and productivity skills, especially if you're running a productivity business. I mean, you do need it. Otherwise, you've got to speak from what you kind of know. That stuff's helpful. But the bigger picture, I think, is just. So your question was how did I do it? I physically put in patterns in my calendar where I would rest regularly. So and these patterns some of these are described in my book. The biggest one is like my digital Sabbath. Every Saturday, I have 24 hours a day where I do not work, which means for me, it means turning off my phone for the whole day because my phone is work. I'm swiping and typing. I'm checking emails. I'm using social media for work. I'm not going to work on my day off. So I have a full day with no plans, where my kids and I and my wife, we focus our activities deliberately around learning how to rest deeply and how to remember who God is, remember the purpose of life, the values that we have that sustain us. So we create that pattern, and we've learned over years to practice a day of rest. I have quarterly retreats, which help with my strategy. So I have a day where I just think. I walk on a beach, and this is kind of the stuff I learned in Reset. I walk up and down the beach with a journal, piece of paper, and I just think and I rest. And wherever my mind goes, I'll just let it go there. I often reflect on what I've done in the last quarter, and I think about what I'm going to do in the next quarter. And I just allow my decisions to be deeply shaped by reflection rather than just activity. I have a daily pattern where I, write in my journal and I think. I go walking really regularly, like as in I'd probably walk 30 minutes a day, just down a walking path, just to think and reflect. And, so these patterns I've put into my life, I suppose. Dinners are another one. Every Wednesday night we eat with our neighbors, and we've done it for 10 years. And so we create a community around a simple throw together meal that lots of people contribute to. And so I create a whole lot of friendships. So I think what I did is I worked out what are the things that are going to be really important to me, irrespective of whether the business survives or not. I'm going to put them in first as a pattern, and I'm going to stick to them religiously, realizing that if my business is worth anything, it has to work around it. And it did cost me. I mean, you say I'm successful, but I've been doing business 10 years. I think if I went harder and I didn't spend so much time to invest in community, in my church community, in myself, in my fitness and family, my business would have been more profitable, and I would have become more profitable a lot quicker. But I traded off time. I'm happy to be less profitable for a longer period of time, but I'm healthy. And I've got a great family, and I love my wife. I've been married 20 years from last week, and I've got a great relationship. Yeah, and I've got a great community. I've got a bunch of friends who I've eaten dinner with every week for like 10 years, and friends of friends. And I've got a garden that I love, a backyard that I've invested in. Life's good. And,
I mean, a lot of people, I know a lot of successful people who are not happy people either. And so, like, what's the point at the end of the day? And I'm really interested. I know you've mentioned it several times about unplugging, like you have the Sabbath on the technological Sabbath on the Saturday. I'm really interested to hear when you're working with your clients, and like I said before, they're more like senior level and stuff like that. How do people react to that? Because I mean, like I know bosses who work all the time. Like they don't ever have a day off. And I guess, how do you convince people that like this is the way to go? And like, what results have you seen from that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, firstly, you get two reactions. I mean, the majority reaction is that people deep down, they know that their life is unsustainable and they deeply desire space. That they want more space in their life to live, to do the things that really matter. And they don't know how to do that. And they feel caught, or they feel stuck, or they don't want to take responsibility for the fact that they can change their life, but they know they need it. So I don't have to convince people that they need space. Convincing people to unplug from your tech, that can be a different question.
Yeah.
WTF is one thing someone said when what's that for?
Yeah.
But no, look, we when I show people the research and I explain the reasoning behind why we turn off our tech,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a no-brainer, particularly post-COVID. And this is where it might be, worth looking at the research. So, I mean, when I looked at my book, and I came to the question, what is the relationship between being productive and using technology? Because I think they're very interlinked and we need to understand the relationship, but it's actually complex. So if you imagine a graph, productivity against technology, most culture says it's linear. More technology and harder work is more productive, right? That's kind of the language we hear. But it doesn't play out in the executives I coach. It doesn't play out in the research. It's more like an upside down curve. So you need to use technology well to be productive. And that's the kind of email ninja, list assassin kind of skills that I teach in how to use tech well. But then you reach this productive middle where more technology doesn't make you more productive. You just you plateau.
Right.
But then if you reach for your phone first thing in the morning and last thing at night, you're on it when, you pull it out when you're on the toilet. You have music in your ears all the time. You're always listening to podcasts, but you never have time to have any silence and solitude. If you get more apps and more games and more tech, you end up in what we call digital overuse, and you slide down the bottom side of the curve on the right, and you actually end up spending more time on tech and being less productive and statistically less happy, and you live less. So there's a sense where like tech overuse is bad for our health, happiness, and productivity, and it's not hard to show people that actually we need two sets of skills. You need to use tech really well on that left part of the curve to make you more productive. And you need to be really good at unplugging regularly to experience the fullness and depth and breadth of humanity away from a screen. And it will not only make you healthier and happier, it will actually increase your productivity, because multitasking kills you. Working to distraction kills you. If you never pause to reflect on the meaning of the podcast you listen to and then apply it to your life, you're not going to be more productive. You just know stuff, but that's not wisdom. So it's not a hard sell when leaders and executives realize, I am wired and I'm sleep deprived and I'm not investing in my kids. In fact, I know that when I'm hanging out with my kids in the kitchen and I really want to give them my attention, all I can think about is how many hearts I've got on Instagram that I'm not checking right now. What people know, that people know this isn't working for them. They just don't know how to get out of it.
Well, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me, like how just explaining the basics, because I think it's all intrinsic and we know it. We just need somebody to tell us sometimes that that's how it needs to be. And so I guess to round this all out, what is like a very small thing that somebody could do right now, like somebody listening could form a habit to make them, either take that technological Sabbath or make them a little more focused or make them just a little happier? Like what's a little thing that I could start to do right now?
Yeah. So look, one simple thing is just an awareness activity. I would say audit your digital habits. So just spend a day and just reflect on what you habitually do. Do you reach for your phone as the alarm and then turn it on and then look at Gmail or look at Instagram or whatever you do? Like, what are your habits and what are your patterns from technologically through the day? And then identify, if I did that every day, what does that say about me? Because your behaviors shape you longer term, and have a sense of have a sense of what you might need to change and what might be working, because a lot of it might be working really well. So I'd say start with awareness. I know that's not necessarily what you've asked, but as a physiotherapist, I've realized that you can throw a treatment at someone, and if you haven't diagnosed the cause of their shoulder pain, is it bursitis or tendonitis, or is it stiffness? Do you know, if you don't know what's
Right.
causing the pain, well, then I can throw a bunch of treatments at you and roll the dice to see if it works. So you do want to have a sense of where your pain points are first. But to answer your question, if I was to throw out one, let me think, if I was to throw out one random tip that I think benefits everyone, is have a digital free meal. And that's definitely research-based. So families who simply sit around a table and have a meal with their kids or with each other, if you don't have kids, or even eat with others. If if you're single, then find someone to eat with on a regular basis. Just eating together without your phone, so put it all away, without a screen, without the TV on. The benefits are unbelievable. So if you have young kids, it increases numeracy and literacy skills. Their ability to read and write is significantly increased by just talking with parents around the dinner table. I think it's the second most important thing to do outside of reading books to them. If you have a 12-year-old girl, by the time she hits 17 or 18, she is statistically way less likely to be pregnant, be addicted to drugs. She'll have higher college entrance scores. Longer term in adulthood, she'll have less mental health issues. She'll be better placed in terms of career and income. Like just eating a meal together and talking is exceptional from a research perspective. And it doesn't even matter what you cook. So you can get $2, pizza from the supermarket, which is terrible to eat. And the outcomes are the same as if you spend heaps of money and cook organic broccolini. The point is that you are having real conversations around the table, unmediated. And if you do that with people you love on a regular basis, everyone becomes healthier and happier. We just need to learn that skill again. But it's not that hard.
Right.
But and I know that many of you do it. Some of you might like, well, that's just a no-brainer. But I guarantee there is an increasingly huge percentage of the population that has never even eaten a meal together as a family. And we need to recapture that because it's beautiful and it helps us.
Well, I think that's a beautiful place to stop. And, we always like to give our guests a little space to tell us where to find you. And, if they want to hear more about you and want to get some of those email tips, where can we get to?
Yeah, so Spacemakers, plural, .com.au, AU's for Australia. That's where you'll find my stuff. You can read more about the book. I'd love you to buy the book. It won the Australian Business Book of the Year award.
Yeah.
For personal development book. So there's heaps and heaps of tips and really deep thinking about how do you actually make space from the tech world in your own life. You can buy that on Amazon. Emailninja.com.au is where you can get free videos to help you get your inbox to zero. And there's lots of different Email Ninja stuff out there through my website. So feel free to look at that. And I run training through Zoom for teams on digital wellness. So how to really think deeply at a wellness level for your team. Unplugging and unwinding as a regular habit from tech post-COVID. As well as, how to be an email ninja or a list assassin. I've run that training online as well. So feel free to contact me and we'll have a conversation in person.
That all sounds great. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Daniel. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Daniel. Appreciate you having me.
All right. So you weren't here for Daniel Sih, but it was an interesting conversation I had with him. And I think in a weird way, it has reflected a lot of our past weeks. A lot of faith went into his decision to move into another area of his life, and talk about, doing this coaching stuff and leaving stability, which is what he says, and moving on. I had a really interesting call with actually a talk with him afterwards, which sucks, but he was talking about, he talks a lot about the technological sabbatical and how he implemented that on Saturdays during his life. And he got into it later. He's going to send us a sheet that like goes through like all the like how to actually do the steps to that. So I think next week we'll reflect on that and like how to actually like do it. But I was very interested in that. Like, how do you? It's not easy because he was like, it's not easy. It's not like this just comes out of nowhere. You have to be very like diligent to try to accomplish this goal. What about you? Do you think how would you start a technological sabbatical?
Well, it makes me think about like if people are interested, they can go back and listen to like Darcy Loma, right, who had that stillness practice. And I think this is another example of that. So when Daniel and I were doing our pre-call, he talked about like the turning off his phone, right? So he does it, I think, like 1 or 2 hours before he goes to bed. The closing of the laptop, the things like that. So I mean, I think it's one of those where, yeah, like I spent the weekend away. I mean, I didn't take a technical sabbatical, but I just didn't have my phone on me. I came back on Sunday and I had 27 messages. And they weren't important, right? They weren't important.
Right.
So, but it is funny to think about when we have these conversations, because it's not just about you and your choices, but it is the connection that you have with others, where like you also have to kind of communicate to other people, like, hey, like I'm not going to be responding for a minute, right? And like it's not like you can have an auto response on your text. So like I think it's funny where like how to even construct that separation so people can expect it from you,
Yeah, and I also like he talked about doing this for executives, and I was very interested how he sells this idea. He didn't really get there for me of how he sells this idea to executives, these people who spend all their time online and are these go personalities. It seemed like you just have to you just have to work at it. You just do small. I'm interested to see what this technique looks like. I'm interested to see what his program is, and we'll reflect on it next week, and we'll kind of like go through it. I think because I'm really interested in this, how this all looks. But we hope that you really got something from this interview. We hope that you possibly try a technological sabbatical in your own lives, and that you keep on working for you until the end, until the next time. Thanks. Wow, that was terrible. All right, I'm going to cut that out. So until the next time, we'll be working for you guys, and we're out.
Ciao.